Warning: All Things Crime is a true crime production that may contain violent or disturbing material. Viewer or listener discretion is advised.
Just, nice and quiet and all that. But it was surrounded by woods. And one day I'm getting in my car on the way to work, and I throw my stuff in and I put my right foot in and I go to sit down, and my left foot is stuck on something. And I look, and it looks like this big furry cat is humping my leg. Only I realized that it's got big teeth and it's biting my ankle. And it's a fox. I had never seen a fox before. I never met one, and certainly didn't expect one to be attached to my leg like this. So I get out, and of course, my first instinct is grab my gun to shoot it. And then I was like, no, somebody is setting me up, because this thing came out of nowhere, and I thought I'm being punked, and there's a camera somewhere. And so I was like, they want me to shoot myself in the foot, right? That's what's going to happen here. And so I put my gun away, and I'm like slamming it against the car, and I have to eventually use some very choice language, and I dragged it all the way into the garage. It won't let go. And I grab a shovel and I start whacking it over the head. And finally it lets go and runs under my car. That is because her parents thought they were protecting her, but didn't realize that she had this access. The access is there. And believe me, if you don't talk to your kids about sex or sexual victimization, there are definitely people out there who would love to talk to them about it.
Right.
Because that's part of the grooming process. And kids are curious about sex because as adults, we give all these nonverbals where we tell them not to talk to us about sex, because if it comes on the radio, we turn it off. On the TV show, we don't let them watch it. We don't let them watch. We block them on the internet from sexually related topics and videos and so forth. So they know that this is not something their parents want to talk to them about, and so they don't go to their parents when something comes up in a sexual nature, and that's unfortunate. If you're open with your child about sex from day one, there's no reason not to start talking to them like you talk to them when they're a tiny little baby, just after they're born. The earlier you start, the less of a hurdle it is to get over to talk to them. The longer you wait, the harder it is to talk to your child about sex. And you don't have to do it in an outrageous way. You can do it in a sexually appropriate way, age appropriate for that child. And you can do it in a loving, caring, supportive way. Make sure they know that you're doing this to help protect them. You're teaching them something, and it's a wonderful thing. And they will grow up and things will develop and so on and so forth. And you can do this. And if you do that, what you're doing is you're preventing your kids from hearing rumors and searching out away from you. They'll come to you with questions. You gotta get rid of your hangups about it before you can talk to your kids about it. So
Right.
It's something that I think every parent needs to do, just because it is a real and present risk for every kid. Yeah, they're going to find out and they're going to be curious. And again, there are so many avenues for them to get information, and most of them are not going to be protected avenues, and some of them are going to set them up for victimization. So why even risk that?
Oh, absolutely. So, hey, one of the things that I think the last time we actually talked was when that West Memphis 3 show came out.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously switching gears here a little bit. So
we did a little backing on that show.
Yeah, that was awesome, man.
Of course, I've been one of your biggest fans ever since I met you.
Oh yeah, and that was just the coolest thing. And the discussion with you and I can't remember the
Bob Ruff.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a stud, man. That was a great show.
Yeah, thank you. I tell you, when we were watching the videos of a particular interview and I heard him say that he waited at the restaurant for the cops to come to make the report away from his house. You know, that hair that stands up on the back of your, that's what happened. And I said, oh my God, he didn't want the cops at his house. Why wouldn't you make the report from your home? Why wouldn't you have the cops come to your home so that if your kid arrived back home, you'd be there rather than him coming to an empty home? If you
Right.
didn't know your kid wasn't coming home, yeah, you could make that move. But if you thought your kid and your kid was supposed to be home, if you thought your kid was coming home, why would you stay at this restaurant away from home and keep your wife there too for a cop, waiting for a cop to arrive and then waiting to make this whole report? That whole time your kid could have been at home and you never knew. And that sounded very inconsistent with a father who was actually looking for his child. So that
Yeah.
just kind of perked my ears up. And then you listen to little details and nuances of what he said, and that created a lot of suspicion in my mind.
That case had a ton of just bizarre things going on. So,
Yeah. But the other thing that really clicked in my mind in talking to Bob, because he asked me, he asked me some question very early on. And I said, you have to understand, this is the only triple homicide of 8-year-old boys in United States history that I'm aware of. It's never happened before in my career or since in my career. So let's look at why. Is it a triple homicide of 3 8-year-old boys, or is it a homicide of one boy and the murder of 2 eyewitnesses? And that changed everything, because you're not looking for some kind of monster that would run around and kill 3 boys. What you're looking for is somebody who probably killed somebody out of rage and then had to cover his tracks.
yeah, that
It's
makes
a
sense.
much more realistic crime, especially for that neighborhood, for the situation. And, had the investigating officers taken that tact immediately instead of looking for Satanists, it would have saved 3 young men a couple decades in prison, and it would have actually probably resolved the case, a case that still remains open today.
Yeah, it's fortunate. As far as the MVAC goes, we've never had a shot at some of that evidence, the sticks,
I know.
things that like,
And the knots, yeah.
yeah, the knots of the ropes, even the clothing that he had to have stripped off there.
Hmm.
If they would have found him relatively soon, that's not, and if it was stored properly, there's a chance.
I
And
know. And so, a request, and hopefully one day they will
yeah,
comply and they'll move the case forward. But to think that they still consider this case closed and resolved with the Alford plea, that is literally insane. It's insane. To think that those 3 guys had anything to do with this is just it's just pure ignorance. Uh,
well,
just
it's
unfortunate.
and in fact that kind of segues into something that I was discussing, I think, with Cloyd Steiger. I don't know if you know him, a homicide
Hmm.
detective
Yeah.
out of Seattle. Yeah, it's interesting that there's almost a compartmentalization in agencies when it comes to cases. And well, in fact, I was talking to Lee Meller as well, and he was saying, at some junction, most detectives are going, especially a homicide detective, are going to come upon a period in a case. This isn't the run of mill homicide. This is the
Hmm.
one where there's something weird going on here, like exactly what I would put the West Memphis 3 in,
Hmm.
where they're like, you know what? This needs to be taken up to another level. We've got to bring in some expertise from the outside and look at this and make sure that we're on the right track, because like you said, everything is time sensitive, especially when it involves children.
Yeah.
And so the more time that you spend on a certain case or on a certain path, especially if that path is not accurate, then the further away, it's like an aircraft that's off by 2 or 3 degrees. After an hour, that's a long ways off.
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, with the fleeting nature of forensic evidence and eyewitnesses and anybody who might be able to help, or the ability to destroy evidence on somebody who did bad things, time is not our helper. It's definitely an enemy.
Well, I've kept you for a while, so before I go, one of my favorite things about doing this show is finding something and lightening things up a little bit, and maybe
Okay.
finding something that's a little more humorous. So, if you were at Thanksgiving dinner, you got your friends and family around you, and pre-COVID, obviously, because you can't do
Yeah.
that now, but and somebody was saying, Jim, tell us the funniest thing that has ever happened to you in your career. I'm sure you've got a couple of those in your back pocket. What would you say?
Wow. Well, I guess it has to be the Fox incident. So I was living in Washington D.C. and working in Quantico in the behavioral analysis unit, and somebody told me about an auction that was, they were auctioning tools at this house in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is closer to where I was working. And I went there and I bought some tools and I ended up buying the house too. And I moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, from New York City to the middle of the woods. Literally, the house was surrounded by like 1,800 acres of woods. And it was incredibly isolated and just, nice and quiet and all that. But it was surrounded by woods. And one day I'm getting in my car on the way to work and I throw my stuff in and I put my right foot in and I go to sit down and my left foot is stuck on something. And I look and it looks like this big furry cat is humping my leg. Only I realized that it's got big teeth and it's biting my ankle. And it's a fox. I had never seen a fox before. I never met one, and certainly didn't expect one to be attached to my leg like this. So I get out, and of course, my first instinct is grab my gun to shoot it. And then I was like, no, somebody is setting me up because this thing came out of nowhere, and I thought I'm being punked, and there's a camera somewhere. And so I was like, they want me to shoot myself in the foot, right? That's what's going to happen here. And so I put my gun away, and I'm like slamming it against the car, and I have to eventually use some very choice language, and I dragged it all the way into the garage. It won't let go. And I grab a shovel and I start whacking it over the head. And finally it lets go and runs under my car. So I go inside and I call 911 and I'm calmly telling them, well, I'm not really calmly telling them. I'm screaming like a little girl. Hey, this wild animal's attacking me. Oh my God, that's terrible. And so they said, calm down, sir, calm down, sir. And I can't believe this recording never showed up at my retirement, but they said, you have to catch it because we need to section its brain for the rabies test. And they said, whatever you do, don't do anything to its head. And I was like, oops. Oh, well. So I went back outside and I grabbed like the shovel and a garbage can and I'm going to catch this thing. Right. And I come around the corner of the house, is biting on the chain link fence, trying to get at a Rottweiler, which he was like, you're at this point. And he, Fox sees me come around the corner, just looks at me and just comes straight at me with like hissing and foaming at the mouth and all this stuff. And I said, the hell with this. And I grab my gun and I do my Weaver stance and I shoot him twice. No, I shoot him once and it was in the right shoulder. It goes right through him and doesn't even phase him. I shoot him again, dead center of mass, and he falls down. And then because I'm from the Bronx, I go up and give him one behind the ears because you mess with the wrong guy. And then I said, what was interesting is during that time, I said to myself, oh, I'm going to have to call my neighbors and tell them why I'm shooting. Even though they're like a half mile away, they'll hear this. But then as I'm pulling the trigger, it just sounded like pop, pop, pop. And I don't have any headphones on. I don't have any ear noise suppression in my ears, but it just sounded like pop, pop, pop. And I was like, wow, I guess I don't have to call him. But immediately my phone starts ringing because my neighbors were calling to find out what I was shooting. So it was really loud, but that was the auditory, what's it called? Auditory, I can't remember what it's called, like closure, where your ears like shut down and your focus becomes incredibly focused on the target. And I saw that fox. What I didn't see were the two 1,000-gallon propane tanks right behind him that I could have blown up with those shots. I mean, it was just crazy, but you just get totally focused on your target.
Kind of
Anyway,
the fight or flight response there.
yes, yeah. And so the guy from game control comes out, and he gets one of those grabber things and picks it up and says, damn, this thing looks like Swiss cheese. What happened to him? Anyway, he says, you're gonna have to, go to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and the doctor says, you're gonna have to get these rabies shots, but let me give you this shot of Dilaudid first. I was like, Dilaudid, isn't that like a narcotic? And he said, yeah, this is going to be really painful. And I was like, I'm not taking narcotics. I'm an FBI agent, He rolls up a towel and says, bite on this. And I was like, are we in the Old West or something? You're going to give me a shot of whiskey next? Anyway, oh my God, it was the most painful thing in the world. He gave me 4 shots around the bites on my ankle, and then 9 other shots in my hips and shoulders, and they were the most painful. It was like shooting Jello into you, so it was like tearing open your flesh. It was very horrible. And I had to get that the 1st, 3rd, 7th, 14th, and 28th days, all those shots again. It was not fun. But when he told me that it was going to be painful, I said, well, couldn't we wait and see if I actually get rabies? And he said, it's 100% fatal. I was like, all right, let's go. So I did that.
Juice me up, man.
Yeah. I came home, and the tail from the fox is hanging from my front door. So I was like, did I move into some voodoo kind of town here? What's going on? But apparently after the fox hunts, that's what was done. And Virginia has fox hunts. That's what the winner gets, the tail. All right, great. That's what I really wanted. And then I get to work the next day, and my office is crossed with police line tape. And on the floor is a chalk outline of a fox and 3 shell casings. So, everybody's a comedian, So my colleagues thought that was kind of funny. So I would say that, and then the resultant reports about this at my retirement were the funniest thing that happened to me as an FBI agent.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, Jim, I've done this. I think this is like the 23rd episode of All Things Crime. And of all the stories that I have heard, that has to be definitely one of the better ones. And
thank you. Well,
there's one with, she was a cop in Ohio, and she got a call one night that some guy was reporting a Sasquatch in the backyard that was like dancing around a fire. Obviously this guy was completely inebriated, but
perhaps, or
short of Sasquatch. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure they took that into consideration. It might've been ugly neighbors, but short of Sasquatch in the backyard, man, that fox chewing on your ankles. That's a great story.
It was insane. And while I was getting the shots the next time, or 2 weeks later, there was a 76-year-old man who was out chopping wood in his backyard, and the same exact thing happened to him. He just, out of nowhere, only he just had an axe in his hand, and he just swiped he swiped down and cut the fox's head off, and just walked into the hospital with the fox's head. So,
So did the fox end up having rabies?
He did have rabies, yes.
Well, good thing you got those painful shots.
Yeah, and I didn't end up with it, which is a good thing. One thing with rabies that I learned is the time it takes is directly proportional to the distance between your brain. Once it gets to your brain, you're gonna die. Like a woman who was cut by a bat in her hair, and it clawed her scalp. She died very quickly from it. And so you got to be careful. Rabies is not something you mess with. And I understand that they've done a little better in terms of the shots, that they're not as frequent and not as horrible. So hopefully it's not as bad if anybody else gets bit by a random fox that's out trying to chew your ankles.
Well, I've seen people like playing with raccoons and things like that, and I'm just like, that is a wild animal, and if it's aggressive, you have absolutely no idea.
What they're capable of.
I grew up in the woods, and so I've learned a lot of these things, but for the people that haven't, just stay away from them.
I didn't, and I knew enough to try to stay away from them.
Well, hey, I'm going to end this here. So I appreciate your time.
It's great talking to you, Jared.
Okay. Hey, thanks.
And, We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Keep up the good work. Take care.
You too. Appreciate
Bye.
it.